Jamie, my cousin on my mom's side, invited me to this New Year's thing she was putting together. Nothing crazy, just a quiet weekend away at her family's old hunting cabin up in northern Pennsylvania, a couple hours from anywhere with real cell service. We'd all had rough years, and I think everyone just wanted a break from people, from work, from the noise of trying to hold your life together. When she texted me the invite, I didn't even hesitate. I'd been running on fumes for months and needed somewhere to collapse that didn't have expectations. We got there around 4 in the afternoon on the 30th. The place looked exactly like you picture it. Small, slanted roofed, and tucked back off a dirt road that barely counted as a driveway. It was one of those cabins that felt like it had settled too deep into the earth. Her family mostly used it during deer season, so it smelled faintly like old gun oil and would smoke, with this underlying musty thing that clung to the walls. You know the kind of place. Every floorboard has its own voice, and the silence around it feels too thick. Jamie had brought Milo, her black and white mutt with one cloudy eye that always made him look like he was staring through you instead of at you. He didn't warm up to people easily, but he was loyal to her in that intense way that makes you wonder if they'd survived something together. He wasn't a big barker, just very observant. Always seemed like he was waiting for something, even when he was lying still. Outside, the snow had started falling slow and lazy, like it was settling in with us. By 10 o'clock, the windows were covered, and the world looked like a snow globe someone had forgotten to shake again. At some point around 10:30, Milo started pacing. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a slow loop from the fireplace to the front door and back. But he kept doing it, again and again, no barking, just this steady rhythm of claws ticking across the floorboards. You could hear it even over our conversation, which started to feel weird. Jamie called him over a few times, but he didn't even glance at her, just kept doing his little circuit. At first, we wrote it off. New smells, new space. Maybe he was hearing mice in the walls, cabin stuff. But the pacing didn't stop. In fact, it got tighter, more anxious. Then he froze at the door, completely still, tail low, shoulders locked. And then he let out this sound, a low constant growl, not loud, almost like he was trying not to make noise but couldn't help it. That's when the room started to feel different. Jamie stood up and asked if anyone else had heard something. None of us had. I muted the TV, and for a moment we all just sat there listening. You could hear the wind outside, faint but steady. Nothing else. Then came the knock. 2 soft knocks at the back door. It was like a movie moment, honestly. We all looked at each other. Then Jamie laughed, a nervous, forced sound, and asked if one of us was messing around. The thing was, the back door didn't have a path. We'd come in through the front, because it was the only part shoveled. The back opened straight into the woods. And the snow back there was untouched. Even animals hadn't gone through yet. Micah grabbed a flashlight and said he'd check it out. We all followed him. He turned on the outside floodlight, and it cast this pale yellow cone over the yard. Nothing. No footprints, no drag marks. The snow back there was undisturbed, completely smooth. I remember how sharp the edges of the light looked on it, like we were standing at the edge of a stage staring into a blank set. Micah stepped outside, and I remember holding my breath without meaning to. He walked a few feet out, scanned the tree line, then came back in. Locked the door again. Nobody said anything. What could you say? Maybe it was a bird, didn't really cover it. We went back to the main room, turned the TV up, and tried to act normal. But Milo wouldn't stop. He stayed locked onto the front door, body tense, ears twitching. At one point, he started walking toward it, then stopped halfway and sat. Like he didn't want to get closer, but couldn't ignore it either. Then at 11:42, the power went out. No flicker, just full stop. Heater off, TV off, lights gone. Silence. The kind that feels full of waiting. Jamie pulled a flashlight out of her bag. I used my phone, but the beam was useless beyond a couple feet. We checked the breaker, nothing obvious. But none of us wanted to open the door and mess with the fuse box outside. Nobody said, let's leave. We all knew the road was buried. Even if the car could start, it wouldn't get far. We were stuck, and that realization sat in my stomach like a cold stone. Then Milo barked, and the front door handle moved. I saw it. We all did. That slow, deliberate turn, like someone testing a key they weren't sure still worked. Then it stopped. Jamie swore under her breath. Micah moved forward, but only a step. None of us wanted to be the one closest to the door. I leaned in, not sure why, and pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. At 11:54, we heard another knock. This time, it came from the ceiling above the living room. The attic. Jamie just stared up at it, said no one had been up there in years. Just insulation and traps. No furniture, no storage, just one small hatch in the ceiling. Micah grabbed the poker from the fireplace and climbed the ladder, flashlight in his other hand. We stayed at the bottom, listening. The ladder creaked like it was holding its breath. He didn't find anyone, but the hatch was open, and the dust that had coated it earlier was wiped in a wide arc, like someone had pushed it open with their head. We didn't even pretend after that. No theories. No nervous laughter. We dragged the couch closer to the fireplace and stayed there. All of us. No one even got up to pee. Milo lay under the table, still watching the door, like his job wasn't over. Midnight came. No cheers. No countdown. Just this cold, shared silence. Then the bang hit. A single, heavy slam against the wall of the cabin. We all jumped. Milo exploded into barking, the loudest I've ever heard from him. But even he didn't run toward the noise. Then came the sound, a long, slow scraping, like something being dragged around the outside of the house. The sound moved steady from the far corner of the building toward the back. You could trace its path with your ears. No one moved. Then I whispered something. I don't even remember what, and Micah and I crept toward the kitchen window. We crouched low, waited, listened. When we finally looked, we saw it. Not a person, not an animal. Just one long trench carved in the snow. From the woods all the way to the house. No footprints. Just that line, like something had been pulled. And at the end of that line, right where the foundation started, there was a perfect circle. Not deep, but clean. Like someone had been standing there, perfectly still. And then nothing. No trail away from it. Just that one path in. Like something came up to the cabin and stayed. That was it. No more debate. We grabbed what we could and ran to the car, slept in it with the engine running. Milo finally curled up and went to sleep once we were away from the cabin. In the morning we checked again. The trench was still there. The circle had started to fill in. We left within the hour. Jamie sold the cabin. We haven't talked since. Now every New Year's, I stay somewhere loud. With strangers, with music, with lights, somewhere nothing can creep up quietly. Aiden, my cousin, invited me to spend New Year's at his family's cabin up near Rockwell Lake in northern Idaho. It wasn't supposed to be a party or anything, just the three of us, me, Aiden, and his younger brother Drew. We were all close growing up, practically inseparable for most of our childhood. The cabin was deep in the woods, past a narrow dirt road that turned to snowpack well before we reached it. The place hadn't changed since we were kids. Our grandfather built it by hand back in the 60s, surrounded by tall pines and silence. One floor, one wood stove, a couple of old bunk beds, and a kitchen that smelled like cedar and dust. There was no cell service, which was the point, apparently. Aiden was trying to recapture some kind of rustic purity, or whatever. He brought a box of fireworks, a bunch of firewood, and way too much beer for 3 people. Drew, still the nerd of the trio, brought this crank-powered radio and a telescope he claimed was for stargazing, but mostly just made him look like a budget conspiracy theorist. I came light, just clothes, some snacks, and this vague sense of dread I couldn't really explain. I chalked it up to winter nerves, or maybe I just didn't trust the whole no signal, no neighbors thing. Around 9, we bundled up and headed outside to prep for the fireworks. The clearing behind the cabin was perfect for it, packed down with snow and open enough to launch without hitting any trees. Aiden was messing with the small rocket, trying to light the fuse even though the wind kept blowing it out. Drew was pacing in the snow, stomping little patterns with his boots like he was bored. Then he suddenly stopped and said, "Hey, did one of you bring a dog?" We all froze. He was staring past the clearing, into the trees. There was something standing there. At first I thought it was just a stump or maybe a rock covered in snow, but it wasn't. It was upright, had legs, shaped kind of like a wolf or maybe a bear, but it was too thin, tall but gaunt. The limbs were too long for its body, and its head was angled low, like it was sniffing the ground or watching us. It didn't move, just stood there, silent, maybe 30 feet past the treeline. Aiden waved his arms and shouted. Tried to scare it off like you would a coyote. Nothing. Not a twitch. Then it did this thing I still can't fully explain. It backed into the woods, but it didn't walk away. It didn't turn or pivot or anything. It just slid backward into the darkness, legs stiff, body rigid, like it was being pulled by a string. Drew muttered something about mange and turned back toward the cabin. We all followed. No one said much. We left the fireworks half buried in the snow. Back inside, we tried to pretend it was nothing. Opened more beers, turned the radio until we got some static that almost resembled music, and laid out snacks like that thing hadn't just stared us down. Then the lights started flickering. Not like a bulb dying, more like a pulse. On-off on every few minutes. Aiden figured the generator might be freezing up. Around 10.30, he pulled on his boots, grabbed a flashlight, and told us he'd be back in 2 minutes. I stood by the window and watched him head toward the little shed where the generator sat. The moon was bright enough to see his outline against the snow. He was halfway there when he stopped. Bend down. There was a dark trail leading to the shed, not footprints, just a single line, like something had been dragged through the snow. He stepped forward to look closer. The flashlight beam shifted to the left and then blinked out. Just like that. No shout. No thud. He just vanished. I didn't think. I ran outside, calling his name. Drew followed, slipping once on the icy steps. We found the flashlight lying in the snow, still warm. That detail sticks with me. Still warm, like he'd just dropped it seconds before. No blood. No broken branches. Just another drag trail, fresh and long, leaving away from the shed and back into the trees. We followed it maybe 10 steps before we heard it. This loud, unnatural, crack like frozen wood splintering under weight. Then we saw it. It was crawling across the tree trunks. Not on them, across them, as if gravity didn't apply. And in one of its claws, tangled and limp, was Aiden's coat. Neither of us screamed. We just backed away, carefully, like animals trying not to provoke something they didn't understand. Once we reached the porch, we went inside and shoved the wood stove in front of the door. We turned off the lights and sat there in the dark. Around 11:30, Drew whispered that something was scratched into the windows. I got up and looked. Each pane of glass had the same mark etched into the frost circles with slashes through the middle. We shut the blinds, sat back down, waited. The fire crackled. The radio started hissing again, even though no one had touched it. The crank wasn't turning. Through the static, we heard breathing, slow, deliberate inhales. Then came a new sound, scraping, like fingernails on metal coming from behind the cabin. The lights cut out completely. Total darkness. Drew flicked his lighter. I used the flicker of light to find the flare gun hanging over the fireplace. It was old, but it still worked. It was meant for bears. This wasn't a bear. Midnight hit. Outside we heard footsteps, for at a time, something dragging itself across the outside wall, inching toward the front door. I raised the flare gun. Then there was a knock. One, then two more, then quiet, then a voice low. Calm, just outside the door. It said, "Happy New Year." It wasn't Aiden. I fired the flare through the window. The burst of red lit up the clearing. The thing was right there, arms spread, standing tall. Its joints bent outward like a spider opening itself up. Its mouth opened wide, wider than anything human, and something hit the snow. Aiden's boot. Then the flare went out, and it was gone. We didn't sleep, just waited for the first gray light of morning. At dawn we packed what we could and started walking. It took us nearly 6 hours to reach the road. Eventually, a snowplow driver spotted us and let us climb into the cab without saying a word. Some rumors said Aiden got drunk and wandered off into the snow. Search teams looked for weeks, but they never found anything. New Year's Eve was supposed to be low-key. Honestly, I was looking forward to it being uneventful. I just genuinely didn't feel like pretending to be excited when I wasn't. So when my friend Caleb asked if I could watch his place while he and his girlfriend were in Vermont, it felt like the perfect out. The house was this older place he'd just moved into a couple of months earlier, out in rural northwestern Pennsylvania, a good 20-minute drive from even the smallest town. He described it as still a work in progress, which I took to mean it wasn't exactly cozy yet. I got there around 10:30 in the morning. Inside, the house felt half moved in, boxes stacked in corners, walls mostly bare. Caleb had told me the radiator upstairs was busted, so I set myself up downstairs, space heaters on, thermos of black coffee nearby, and one of those fuzzy throw blankets that look ridiculous but actually do the job. By early evening, the snow had picked up. Still, not a blizzard, just thick enough to blur the trees at the back of the yard. You know that kind of snow that makes everything feel padded? Like even sound has to slow down to get through it. That kind. The house stayed quiet except for the occasional hum of the space heater kicking on. I'd planned to stay up until midnight, mostly just to say I did. I had the TV going on low, flipping between random year-end countdowns, none of which I cared about. Around 11:30, I stood up to stretch and refill my coffee. My back popped in a way that made me feel about 40 years older than I am. The kitchen window looked out over the backyard. That was when I saw him. There was someone standing by the trees, not near the house, not walking or moving, just standing right where the yard ended, and the woods began perfectly still. At first, I thought maybe it was a tree stump or some trick of the light, but the shape was too human. Shoulders, head, everything. I couldn't see a face, just a solid silhouette where no silhouette should have been. There was enough ambient light from the porch for me to make out the shape, but not enough to see detail. The figure stood right in that awkward patch where the light faded into dark. Not totally hidden, but not exactly visible either. I stood there at the window longer than I probably should have, just watching, waiting for them to do something. Wave, step forward, disappear. But they didn't move. Eventually, I backed away, locked the back door, and checked the front even though I knew it was already bolted. Then I turned off the porch light. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought if they couldn't see the house clearly, they'd go away. I sat back on the couch and tried to convince myself it was nothing, a lost hiker maybe, or a neighbor from farther up the ridge. But that didn't really track. Nobody hikes that trail at night, not in the cold, not on New Year's Eve. When the clock hit midnight, I heard faint fireworks in the distance, probably from town. I didn't go back to the window. At 12:30, there was a knock. Not loud, just two precise knocks, like someone trying not to be rude. It was so quiet in the house, the sound felt unnaturally sharp. I got up, moved to the front door, and looked through the peephole. A man stood there in a navy parka, hands tucked into his coat pockets. His face was pale but smooth. No redness or rawness you'd expect from someone standing in the snow for long. He wasn't shivering. He wasn't looking around. He was just standing there facing the door. And then he looked up, right at me, right at the peephole. That hit me weird, like he already knew exactly where I'd be. Like he'd timed it. I asked through the door if he needed something. My voice cracked a little at the end, which I pretended not to notice. He said his car had broken down on the ridge, said he just needed to use a phone. His voice was calm, not pleading, not upset. Like this happened to him all the time, and he was just going through the motions. I told him I could call someone for him, but I wasn't opening the door. He nodded. That's understandable, he said. No frustration, no push, just acceptance. I asked who he wanted me to call. He didn't answer right away. Then he tilted his head slightly and said, "You're watching the house for Caleb, right?" That's when I stopped talking. I stepped back from the door, still staring at the peephole. I hadn't mentioned Caleb's name. There was no note outside, no car in the driveway that could have told him that. And I'd only gotten the key the day before. I went for my phone on the coffee table, grabbed it, and stood there with the screen glowing in my hand. I didn't even dial. My thumb hovered over the keypad while I kept glancing toward the door. Then everything cut off. The power went out. No flicker, no warning, just black. The TV died, the space heater stopped, and the fridge stopped humming. Total silence, except for the faint sound of snow brushing the windows. I stood in the dark for a moment, listening. The porch light was out now, so I couldn't see if the man was still there. I didn't hear him leave. I went into the kitchen and found the drawer where Caleb kept candles. As I struck the lighter and got one lit, I heard the back door creak just slightly. I froze. No footsteps. No voice. Just that soft sound of wood shifting against metal. I crept down the hallway with the candle flickering in my hand. The back door was still locked. The chain still in place. But something felt wrong. I stared at the door for a few minutes, trying to breathe normally. Then I looked down. The boots I'd left by the door were gone. Just gone. The mat was empty except for two wet outlines. I stared at that spot for a full 10 seconds, then grabbed my phone and finally called emergency services. The dispatcher was calm, told me to stay on the line and get somewhere safe with a lock. I told her I already was, but I wasn't sure that meant anything anymore. The officers didn't show up until 1:20. By then the power was back on. No forced entry, not even my own footprints from earlier. One of the officers glanced at me and asked, could an animal have dragged them off? I said maybe. He didn't look convinced, and honestly neither was I. They did a quick walk around the property, then told me to call again if anything else happened. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat on the couch with my phone in one hand, and the candle still burning on the table. Every sound, the fridge kicking back on, the creak of the heater warming up made me flinch. Around 4 in the morning, I finally reached for my phone to text Caleb about what had happened. There was already a message waiting, sent at 12:49. Don't open the door. I forgot to mention. I froze there. I didn't reply. I didn't pack neatly. I grabbed my stuff, locked the door behind me, and drove back to the city before the sun even started to rise. I was 22 when this happened, during winter break at Wexley University, a small college buried in the hills of northern Maine. I worked part-time for campus facilities, mostly maintenance tasks, snow removal, basic lockups. Most of the time I was alone, which I actually preferred. New Year's Eve fell on a Sunday that year. That afternoon, my boss texted me to ask if I'd cover the overnight shift at the maintenance building. The guy who'd originally picked it up called out last minute, something about a family emergency, and they needed someone to be present in case of another power outage. We'd had a few that week because of the heavy snow. I didn't hesitate. It was holiday pay, and all I had to do was stay awake in the break room, monitor the radio, and check in once or twice if something came up. Honestly, I saw it as paid alone time. It had snowed all day. Not a blizzard exactly, but steady enough that by evening the sidewalks were buried again. By 8, the whole campus was just white and quiet. We kept a plow in a separate garage behind the main building. Nothing huge, just a compact utility truck with a front blade. I was told to take it out around midnight and do a single pass through the staff lot to keep the snow from icing overnight. Everything was calm until then. I watched something dumb on my phone, microwaved a sandwich from the vending machine, and stared at the same dry erase board that had said do not microwave coffee mugs since before I was hired. The walkie was completely silent around 11:45. I started getting my stuff together, hat, gloves, coat, the keys to the plow. The building creaked. As I stepped out, it always did that when the temperature dropped, like it was stretching in its sleep. The back lot was buried under at least 4 inches of fresh snow. Maybe more. I followed a narrow, shoveled path out to the garage. The light over the keypad was glowing faintly orange behind a crust of frost. I wiped it off of my sleeve and typed in the 4-digit code. No green light. No sound. Nothing. I tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. On the 3rd try, I finally heard the mechanical stutter of the door motor trying to engage. Like it wanted to rise but was choking on ice. It stalled out with a tired buzz, so I pulled it by hand. The metal groaned but moved. I got it up just enough to duck under, brushing snow off my coat as I stepped inside. Instant blackness. I clicked the light switch near the entrance. Nothing. Not even a hum. My phone flashlight lit up a small cone in front of me, just enough to see the plow part exactly where it should have been, facing outward. I figured the garage must have lost power earlier in the storm. Wouldn't be the first time. It happened the previous winter too, when ice collected on the rooftop transformer. Still, it was unnerving standing in that dark space alone, flashlights shaking slightly from the cold in my hands. I climbed into the cab of the plow and jammed the key in, turned it once. The engine gave a dry cough, and then nothing, no clicks. No dash lights, just silence, like the battery had been sucked dry. I tried again, listening harder this time. Same result, that heavy, dead silence. I sat there for a second, not moving, just breathing in the stale, cold air. It smelled like gasoline and old rubber, and something faintly metallic, like rusted chains. I considered going back inside to radio it in, maybe call the backup guy. That's when I saw something shift in the mirror. At first it was just a blur, a movement that didn't match the static surroundings. I turned off the flashlight and leaned forward, squinting through the narrow view between the dashboard and the windshield. Someone was outside. I could just make out a pair of boots, pacing slowly in the snow right in front of the door. They stopped. My hands were suddenly damp inside my gloves. The cold felt sharper now. Real. Nobody was scheduled to be here. Nobody. All the other maintenance staff had signed off by 6, and the only security on campus stayed near the front gate, over a quarter-mile away. I held my breath, hoping, honestly hoping, it was just a student who stayed behind for break and got lost, or a confused custodian from the town team. But then I heard the beeping, the keypad. They were trying to get in. First attempt, fail. Second attempt, another fail. I slid down in my seat, slowly. Pulled my feet up, crouched tight, and stayed as quiet as I could. My whole body had gone still, not tense exactly, more like a full-body pause. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration was so loud in the silence, it felt like a scream. I didn't dare look at it. On the 3rd keypad attempt, the garage door motor kicked in again, and this time it managed to rise a few more inches. Not all the way, just enough. That's when I saw the gloved hands appear underneath the opening. He was pulling the door up by hand. I pressed myself back into the corner behind one of the shelving units and held still. No thoughts, just instinct. Hide. Stay small. When the door rose to about shoulder height, he ducked in. Snow parka. Thick hood. Flashlight. He didn't say a word. He walked with slow, careful steps, scanning the garage like he was looking for something very specific. The beam of his flashlight moved across the plow, over the walls, down the shelving. He passed within 5 feet of where I was crouched, and I could hear the faint squeak of his boots compressing the snow that had blown inside. He didn't react to the truck at all, didn't even try to check it, just walked to the back wall. There he paused. I watched him reach into his coat and pull out something thin and shiny. Wires. He took out a second, crouched low behind the generator housing. His flashlight angled downward now. He wasn't exploring. He was setting something up. That was enough. I shot up and bolted toward the half-open door, not bothering to stay quiet. I heard him move behind me, maybe even yell something. But I didn't look back. The only thing I remember clearly is how sharp the air felt on my face as I sprinted across the snow-covered lot. Back inside the main building, I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. My legs felt like jelly. I picked up the radio. Dead. I ran up the back stairwell to the second-floor office where we kept the backup landline. It was an old beige thing with a coiled cord mounted on the wall next to the breaker panel. As I reached for it, I finally pulled out my phone. One unread message. It was from our maintenance group chat. Sent at 11:40, 15 minutes before I left for the garage. Heads up, garage code changed. Don't use backlit tonight. Power got cut again. Be alert. I stared at it for a long time, like my brain needed time to translate it into meaning. I didn't leave the office again that night. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against the cabinet. Just after sunrise, 2 campus officers showed up to do a sweep. The garage was empty. No footprints but mine. The plow was still dead. Battery totally shot. But nothing had been moved or taken. No forced entry. No forced entry. No vandalism. Just emptiness. I walked with them to the back wall, where I'd seen the man crouch. All we found was a pair of stiff gloves and a 6-inch wire looped around a bolt. That was it. We checked the cameras next. The outdoor feeds were fine, but the one aimed at the break room door, the one I exited through, had glitched. 20 minutes of footage missing from exactly 11:40 to midnight. No one ever figured out who he was. They checked local records, even questioned a couple of seasonal workers, but no leads. No complaints, no reports of break-ins. My shift at the lodge ended at 11. It's this cabin rental place tucked way back in the Vermont woods. 7 cabins spaced out just enough that you get the illusion of being alone, even if the next group over is only a short walk away. We mostly got people from Boston or New York who wanted a quiet winter retreat, whatever that meant to them. Couples, small families, occasionally someone who brought snowshoes they'd never used before. Normally I'm off for New Year's. It's not a big night around here, but still. I like staying home, heating up leftovers, and watching bad TV until midnight. But the guy who usually handled night maintenance, Colby, decided to pre-game a little too hard the night before and ghosted. So they called me in last minute. The job isn't hard, just repetitive. Walk the grounds every couple of hours. Check the heating systems, especially in the older units. Clear the walkways if it starts snowing. Most importantly, be available for guest calls. If someone can't get their fireplace working or hears something weird in the walls, they want answers fast. That night, 4 of the 7 cabins were booked. I figured I'd do my rounds, stay warm in the office between them, and ride it out. It was quiet up until about 10:30 when the desk phone rang. Cabin 4. A woman on the other end, Marlene, said the lights in the back half of the cabin were flickering. Not in a panicked way, just tired and annoyed, like she'd rather not be dealing with it. I told her I'd come check it out. When I got there, she answered the door with a small, tense smile. Her husband was a few feet back on the couch, hunched over his phone like it was the only thing holding him up. Didn't even glance my way. She said the flickering had stopped by the time I arrived, but something about the way she said it gave me pause, like she didn't fully believe it was over. I offered to check the breaker panel anyway. At first, she hesitated just for a second, but it was there. Then she nodded and let me in. The place was clean and quiet, cozy even. Smelled like cider or one of those candles you'd find in a boutique shop. It had that warmth people try to recreate in photos, like a catalog version of winter. The breaker box was in a closet near the back bedroom. I opened it up, expecting to find a loose switch or something out of alignment. Instead, I saw that one of the breakers was taped in the OFF position. Black electrical tape, thick, cleanly wrapped, not a half job. Someone had taken the time to make sure it stayed down. I turned to Marlene and asked if they'd done that. She stepped in behind me, took one look, and froze. Her face just dropped. "No," she said, "we haven't touched anything." I peeled the tape off slowly and flipped the switch back on. I told her maybe it had been left that way by the cleaning staff. Sometimes they test outlets during turnover. It was a stretch, but I needed to say something. She nodded slowly, but didn't look convinced. I thanked her for her patience, told her to call if anything else came up, and headed back to the office. By midnight, I was in the garage office we used as a control center. Tiny space desk, space heater, a few camera monitors showing the exteriors of the cabins. I logged the cabin for call, grabbed a mug of coffee, and sat down to wait out the last hour. That's when something blinked on one of the feeds. Cabin 7. It had been empty for weeks. No guests, no maintenance. Not even a cleaner had gone through since before Christmas, but the motion camera facing its porch had been triggered. I rewound the footage. At 11:56, a figure walked into frame. Big coat, fur-trimmed hood, walk up the steps. Stood still at the door. No knock, no movement. Just stood there. Then the feed cut out for 4 seconds. When it came back, the porch was empty. I didn't love the idea of going back out, but policy is policy. If a sensor's tripped, you check it. I left a note on the desk, radioed the check-in, and headed out in the utility cart. The ride out to Cabin 7 is a little rough in winter. The snow gets packed unevenly on the trail, and visibility's never great once you're out from under the floodlights. That night was foggy too. The kind of thick air that eats your headlights and muffles sound. Cabin 7 was dark, locked. No footprints in the snow except mine. The porch looked undisturbed. I even checked behind the railing, just to be sure. Nothing. I figured the feed had glitched, started heading back, a little irritated at the false alarm. Then my radio crackled. At first, I thought it was interference. Happens sometimes. But this wasn't static. It was breathing. Not gasping. Not strained. Just slow, rhythmic inhales and exhales. Steady enough that I almost thought it was mine, echoing through the speaker. But it wasn't. I spun around, scanning the trees, the cabin. The trail had just come down. Nothing. I called in on the radio, asked if anyone else was on my frequency. No response. Just that breathing. Quiet plastic Y, like it was filtered through tubing. I turned the volume down to nothing and walked the rest of the way back. When I got to the office, I checked the cameras again. Cabin 4's feed was down. It had been working 20 minutes earlier when I checked the whole grid. I called the landline inside. No answer. So I went back. Their porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see the husband still sitting in the exact same spot. Same posture. Same phone. Like he hadn't moved an inch. I knocked. No one came. I knocked again. Harder. Nothing. I opened the door. The cold hit me immediately. Sharp, dry air like the heat had been off for hours. Colder inside than out. Marlene was in the kitchen. Her arms were wrapped around herself, shaking. She looked like she hadn't moved much either. She said she'd been hearing movement under the bedroom, in the crawl space, not footsteps, scraping, dragging, something heavy shifting on wooden beams. I asked her husband if he'd heard anything. He didn't even look up. Just mumbled, "It's not for us." I asked Marlene where the access panel was. She didn't answer. Just backed into the corner and shook her head. So I went looking myself. In the bedroom, one of the rugs had been kicked aside. The crawl space panel was open about an inch. Dust disturbed, like someone had been down there recently. I knelt down and shined my flashlight inside. For feet, high dirt floor insulation, the usual. Pipes overhead, standard stuff, except for the coat, a parka, fur-trimmed hood. Same as in the video. It was laid out carefully on the ground, like someone had folded it open and left it there. And underneath the collar, partially tucked inside, was a jawbone. Not buried, not hidden, just there. I pulled back fast. The radio on my hip hissed. A voice whispered, low and even, "You turned it back on." That was it. I walked out of the bedroom. Marlene was crying softly now. Her husband still hadn't moved. I told them they needed to pack a bag. Right now. No explanation. No questions. I drove them to cabin 2, closest to the road, set the heat, gave them water, promised a refund, locked the door behind them. Then I drove back, went into cabin 4, opened the breaker closet, and flipped everything off. The next morning, the owner asked about the power cut. I said a tree branch must have hit the line. He nodded, made a note. Cabin 4 went offline the next day for renovations. I never heard from Marlene or her husband again. My cousin Mason and I were staying at my Aunt Renee's place for New Year's. She lived by herself in one of those long, one-story ranch houses out near Millersburg. That week, she was off with her friends on a ski trip somewhere in Vermont, and said we could stay at her place if we wanted a break from our usual family chaos. My parents hosted a big New Year's Eve thing every year, loud, crowded. So yeah, we were all in for a quiet night with no adults. Mason's mom dropped us off around 3 in the afternoon. The roads were iced over and snow covered the ground like one solid sheet. No footprints, no tire tracks, just clean white crust that glittered under the cloudy sky. Before she left, she ran down the usual list of house rules. Turn off the porch lights before bed. Don't leave the fireplace vent open. Double check the locks. Then she paused and said something that didn't really land at the time. You're not in the suburbs out here. Lock up early. Then she backed out of the driveway and left. We were 16, barely supervised, and had the house to ourselves. Of course we didn't lock up early. We dumped our bags in the guest room, claimed the couch, and loaded up the living room with snacks, soda, and Mason's Bluetooth speaker. He had a playlist of horror soundtracks queued up for atmosphere. It was dumb, but kind of fun. I remember thinking it actually felt like we were starting our own tradition. By 10, we were eating caramel popcorn straight from the bag, watching this old horror movie marathon, and throwing out fake resolutions. Mason said he was giving up sugar for a week. Tops. I said I'd stop doom scrolling in bed, which lasted about a day. It felt like the night didn't even belong to a calendar, like time had just paused for us. I got up around 11:30 to use the bathroom, and noticed 2 things we'd completely forgotten. The fireplace vent was still wide open, and we hadn't locked the back door. The fireplace wasn't a real one. It had one of those fake log inserts that look cozy, but don't actually warm anything. Still, there was a vent that went all the way up the chimney, and it let in cold air that had been seeping into the room all night. The metal screen in front of it had been gently rattling every now and then. I thought it was just wind or draft pressure. I reached up and pulled the little handle to close the vent. The rattling stopped immediately. It was subtle, but somehow that quiet made the room feel heavier. Then I headed to the laundry room to check the back door. And that's when I saw them, footprints on the deck, not ours. They came in from the treeline, spaced wide like someone had walked slowly up toward the house. Deep, sunken marks that were already starting to crust at the edges, but still clear enough to make out the tread. What got me though was the direction. They only led to the door, no trail going back. 41:16. I locked it immediately, flicked off the kitchen light, and just stood there for a second. The silence in the room felt tighter now. I didn't see anything moving outside. No shadows or rustling. Just those prints ending at the welcome mat like someone had walked up and never left. I called Mason over. He tried to play it cool, said maybe a delivery guy or someone had stopped by earlier, but I pointed out the undisturbed snow, how nothing had stepped over them or melted them slightly. And he got quiet. His whole body shifted. We went room to room, checking every lock, every window latch. Nothing else was open, just that one door. We heard fireworks in the distance as midnight hit. Mason cracked a joke, something like, "Happy New Year, guess we're getting murdered," and went back to the living room. I stayed in the kitchen for another minute, still staring at the deck, trying to convince myself those prints weren't as weird as they looked. Then I heard the screen on the fireplace rattle again. I'd already closed the vent. It should have stopped. I walked into the living room. Mason had the remote in his lap, but wasn't pressing anything. He was watching the fireplace, not the screen. There were ash smudges now, scattered faintly across the brick. They hadn't been there earlier. The screen started moving again, slow, uneven shakes, like someone trying to nudge it open without fully committing. Not loud, just persistent. I told Mason to step back. He didn't even blink. Then the screen suddenly tipped forward and clattered onto the floor. Ash scattered across the rug. We both jumped back at the same time. Nothing came out. No sounds from inside. But just behind the metal grate, something dark was wedged into the soot. I leaned in just enough to see the edge of what looked like a boot heel. Black, worn, caked with grime. I said, "We're leaving." Mason didn't argue. We grabbed our phones. I took my aunt's spare car keys from the bowl near the front door. Neither of us had our licenses yet, but that didn't matter. I slowly opened the front door, ready to sprint to the car. And there were more footprints, fresh ones this time, pressed into the porch snow, coming from the woods, just like before. But again, they stopped right at the door. No returning path. No drag marks or prints turning away. Just stopped. I shut the door fast and locked it. We turned to run back through the kitchen, figuring we'd call someone, anyone, and the back door was open. Not wide, just a few inches, but enough. I had locked it. I remembered the pressure of the bolt sliding into place. There's no way I imagined that. We stood still, just staring. Then the floor creaked. Twice deep in the laundry room, not settling wood, stepping wood. We bolted. Mason grabbed the fireplace poker. I yanked the biggest knife from the drawer. We sprinted to my aunt's bedroom and slammed the door. It had a lock on the knob, and we turned it fast. Pressed our backs against the door, waited. The handle turned almost immediately. Someone was there on the other side, just testing. Then nothing, no footsteps walking away. No sound at all. We didn't move. I tried calling Mason's mom. No answer. Tried mine. Voicemail. I finally called the sheriff's number I found online and gave them the address. I think my voice cracked. They said a patrol car was nearby. It'd be there soon. When the red and blue lights finally flashed through the window, I almost cried. The officer swept the place. No one was there. Aunt Renee sold the house that summer and never brought it up again. Mason, and I don't talk about it either.